Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're listening to this, and welcome to episode 4 of the album ranking series. And today we are going through the discography of Alice in Chains. Alice in Chains themselves are often labelled under the grunge category due to them coming out of the Seattle scene in the early 90s. And at the time of this recording, they have released 6 albums, 2 EPs, and a live album. As the tier listing system only covers full-length studio releases, you will notice that SAP, Jar of Flies, and the MTV Unplugged album are exempt from the list. If you have a problem with that, take it up with management. The latter two are especially superb, I must say, and the Unplugged album would be the last recording with founding vocalist Lane Staley. Both Staley and original bass player Mike Starr succumbed to heroin addiction, with Lane dying in 2002 and Mike Starr in 2011. After his death, the band reformed in 2005 for Live 8, with William Duvall as the frontman alongside the classic lineup of Jerry Cantrell on guitars and vocals, Sean Kinney on drums, and Mike Inez, who replaced Mike Starr before the release of their third album. The band's sound, as I mentioned, is categorized as grunge, but they are more influenced by metal rather than their label counterparts. So their sort of bread and butter is chromatic, detuned riffs, occasional use of odd time signatures and arrangements, but their most distinctive feature of their sound is the tight vocal harmonies between Cantrell and Staley, and then with Cantrell and Duvall. As far as my introduction to the band is concerned, that was in 2010 when I saw them at Sonisphere Festival in Nebworth, which was a very short-lived rock and metal festival. It was there to sort of compete with Download. I was actually absolutely hooked by the sound, and not long after getting home from the festival, I ended up buying all of their albums that were released at that time, in terms of CDs and DVDs, and I was listening to them an awful lot, and I still do. So, with all the preamble out of the way, let's begin rating some albums. Rainier Fog. Released in 2018, this remains the band's most recent release at the time of this recording, and recorded in their hometown of Seattle. With that information, and with the album title being named after Mount Rainier, which dominates the city skyline, you would have thought this would encapsulate the best of the sound that made them what they are. Alas, it's a yes and a no. The band certainly don't abandon any of their core elements. Duvall's and Cantrell's harmonies are on point as ever, and the album has a dark mood throughout, but the sound overall is very clean, and there isn't really an awful lot of venom in the heavier elements that we as fans absolutely love about the band. The angular, discordant riffs overall have been traded for a more sort of straightforward sounding rock album, which, well, certainly compared to Alice in Chains standards anyway. That being said, the band really does pay homage to their roots in the title track, and Duvall taking the lead vocal on that song as well as on So Far Under, which was the first single from the album. I feel he doesn't get enough responsibility as far as taking the lead vocal is concerned. He feels more like a compliment to Cantrell rather than being the two having like a symbiotic relationship in terms of the vocal harmonies compared to what Staley and Cantrell did before his death. It's always nice to hear when Duvall takes the reins on the lead vocal. It's also the first time where we get to hear a baritone guitar played by Cantrell on the 6.5 minute long Drone. My personal highlights from this album are the title track, Rainier Fog, maybe So Far Under, and the closing track, All I Am. It's a very haunting way to end the album. But why it's down here is simply due to the fact I feel it's an incredibly restrained record. As I mentioned before, there's not really all that much venom and bite and all of those kind of snarling, visceral elements which are present through their previous catalogues. This restraint which I feel lets down the album a little bit, hence why I put it down in number 6. The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. At number 5, we have the band's fifth studio album, The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, released in 2013. Gone are the themes of addiction and grief, instead, using a myriad of themes, if you will, ranging from mental illness in Voices and Lab Monkey, organised religion in the title track, to a 127-hour inspired tale of a helpless explorer in Phantom Limb. The album that came before Black Gives Way to Blue, which we'll see a bit later on in the list, was the band's opportunity to sort of say goodbye to Lane. And whilst always in their hearts, were no longer shackled by losing their original frontman. These new concepts are complemented by the classic, heavy, grungy sound that we absolutely love, some of which are the heaviest that they have put out to date, which would be on songs like Hollow and Stone, full of chromatic, angry riffs and the distinctive vocal harmonies effortlessly locked in. We also have little hints of country music, with the song Scalpel, which intertwines acoustic guitars and slide guitar. The title of the album itself is a theory that certain religious groups believe that rather than the dinosaurs being a product of evolution, were instead conjured up out of thin air by the devil. Whilst ludicrous, this idea, as well as other creationist BS, is the belief that some of these people carry. Whilst fresh and exciting, some of the tracks do overstay their welcome a bit, which results in some sections or codas lasting a few bars longer than what they maybe should do, and therefore feels a little bit bloated at times. Another disappointment is that the crest of the heaviness wave comes down towards the end, meaning that the energy and the intensity seems to sort of fizzle out a little bit. Hung on a Hook and Choke, the two closing tracks, are on the more forgetful side in my opinion, and are easily the songs I come back to the least on this album. My favourite tracks from the album are Hollow, Stone, Voices, and Lab Monkey. Some of these songs I would actually consider and place as some of their best material to date, with and without Lane Staley. Definitely one to check out if you haven't fully integrated yourself with the Duval era. There are some real hidden gems here, and I would defy anyone who tells me that Hollow and Stone are absolute bangers. Alice in Chains. At number 4, we have Alice in Chains' third album, the self-titled release, which came out in 1996. And this would be the last album that would feature Lane Staley on vocals. It would also be, in a lot of people's opinion, including my own, that this would be their darkest album, with themes of helplessness and the depths of addiction being core to the album's sort of theme. These are topics that have obviously been discussed in their previous works, but it's the musicianship which makes this much darker than what they'd done before. The overall production is a lot more kind of lo-fi, the arrangements are more sparse, the guitars, rather than sort of using riffs a lot of the time, using sort of more delicate arrangements and textures instead. And the distorted riffs are now sort of replaced with a lot more saturation and fuzz. That combined with a lot of the songs being an awful lot slower than what they had done before as well, adds to the tension and unease. Those that love this album praise the elements that I had mentioned in the summary. However, if you listen to this album being only familiar with their very early work, or if this is your first time listening to the band at all, and this is your first time, then it will be a bit of a shock to the system. There aren't really all that many sucker punches that make you want to headbang to your heart's content. This feels more like Death by a Thousand Cuts, with songs like Sludge Factory and Frogs often teetering on the edge of a climax or a resolution, but it never comes, simply just fading out. Lane's torment is as raw as it can possibly get, and it would be the tragic story of his final years with us on this mortal coil. Highlights for me on this album are Sludge Factory, Again, Head Creeps, and the devastating closing track, Over Now. As a farewell, there aren't too many more poignant than this one, as it would mark the end of not just Staley's role in the band, but also his role in life. And even more upsetting is the fact that he was aware of everything that was going on. It is by no means an easy listen, but a necessary one for any Alice in Chains fan, both devoted ones and more recent ones alike. Black Gives Way to Blue. Released in 2009, this was the band's first album in 13 years following the death of Lane Staley and the introduction of William Duvall. From the moment you press play, you're struck by the aggression of not just the playing, but the production, and the mix of grief, loss, as well as acceptance are the central themes to the album. All Secrets Known, Your Decision, and the title track were all written either about Lane Staley or the loss of him. The heavy subject matter throughout means that a change of pace is required at times, not like we had seen on previous releases, but songs like Check My Brain and Last of My Kind are heavy, but they're incredibly fun and catchy and easy to get hooked into. And songs like When the Sun Rose Again is a more gentle acoustic song. And these songs, especially, are very a welcome relief to all of the intensity that frequently appears on this album. A couple of the issues that this album has is the production, and a little bit to do with the insertion of Private Hell and Take Her Out as song choices. The production is so loud, so one mistake with the volume on your phone or your CD player would result in your eardrums turning to dust. So proceed with caution before you press play. The album actually fell victim to what's called the loudness war, so everything is pushed so high in the mix that it becomes quite hard to listen to. It sounds incredibly dense because of that. Regarding Private Hell and Take Her Out, I just feel that they're a bit weak compared with the rest of the songs on the album. I think without them, the album would have been an awful lot stronger, and at a push, it might have lifted it slightly higher on this list. But such is the competition, it probably would have remained here anyway. My favourite tracks from this album are All Secrets Known, Check My Brain, Your Decision, and the 7-minute midpoint, A Looking in View. The album itself is a fantastic testament to Lane Staley, and the emotion is palpable. It's heavy, it's intense, and it's full of interesting melodies and fantastic riffs and solos. But yeah, it is so loud. The production makes it quite hard to listen to, but nonetheless, it is brilliant, despite it rating at number 3, but it does have some very stiff competition. Facelift. At number 2, we have Alice in Chains' debut, Facelift, and oh boy, it's a cracker. So much attitude, and that is only in the first few bars of the opening track, We Die Young. Down-tuned weird scale riff? Check. Lane's snarling vocals? Check. Groove? In abundance. The fact it's only 2.5 minutes long as well makes this introduction even more intense. Then we have the classic Man in a Box with its iconic talk box riff. Who said that it was only Living on a Prayer that put that to good effect? With the opening 2 tracks out of the way, you start to think to yourself, how on earth are they going to top this? Well, I'll tell you how. How about Bleed the Freak and Sea of Sorrow? An incredible run of tracks that cycles between visceral and commanding and so in your face with its delivery, but it's hard not to feel anything. Then we get to the midpoint, and the first-time listener may think to themselves, well, we've had 4 amazing tracks, surely that's as good as it's going to be, they'll run out of steam somewhere along the line. Wrong. This is where we get to the Lane Staley vocal masterclass, Love, Hate, Love. 6.5 minutes of one of the greatest vocal performances you'll ever hear in this genre. His rasping, emotional delivery is quite extraordinary, and I would love to go back to the time where I listened to it for the first time. I continue to be absolutely flabbergasted and blown away no matter how many times I listen to this track. There are a couple of songs which I can take or leave, with Confusion and Put You Down being slight blemishes on what is overall a flawless album. I Know Something About You is one of the catchiest, bounciest songs that they've made to date. While certainly not my favourite track, it is incredibly enjoyable and impossible not to tap your foot to. My favourites from Facelift are We Die Young, Sea of Sorrow, Love, Hate, Love, and It Ain't Like That. So, for the fans of the band, you know what's coming at number 1, so let's just crack on with it. It goes to Dirt. At number 1, we have their sophomore release, 1992's Dirt. If the self-titled album is The Slow Death from Addiction, this album appropriately acts as its precursor. A good portion of the album takes you on a journey into the mind of a heroin addict, the impact that the addiction has on himself and those around him, as well as accepting the fact that this is probably how he's going to die. While a very bleak album, it goes so hard. You're introduced to this album with the Staley scream and chromatic riff in 7/4 with the classic Them Bones. Damn That River, which was written about a drunken argument, with yet more chromatic riffs and odd time arrangement. And more of the same with Rain When I Die. The run of tracks halfway through the album on Junkhead, Dirt, Godsmack, and Hate to Feel showcases this nightmare journey with shocking realism. Being in this state of cognitive dissonance where he's so aware of what heroin is doing to him, but feels compelled to carry on using, as it's all he knows. Other songs touch on equally morbid topics such as depression, war, and mortality. It's an incredibly heavy album, both musically and in terms of the subject matter. And it's so blunt in its delivery and with its lyrical content, it's so heartbreaking. And as someone who has family members having issues with addiction, it is quite a hard listen. Then we have the closing track, Wood, which has become a fan favourite and a 90s rock classic, written about their Seattle sound friend Andrew Wood, who was the frontman of Mother Love Bone, who himself died from a heroin overdose. Needless to say, I have quite a few favourites on this album, but as I have done 4 for each of the other albums, I will give this album the same treatment. Them Bones, Damn That River, Rain When I Die, and Down in a Hole would be my personal picks. And there you have it, folks, my Alice in Chains tier listing. Let me know what you think, and as ever, thank you so much for watching, and you have a great day. Boo!